So today we're going to be taking a look at the newest release from Halios. This is actually my first ever time with a Halios hands-on. So let's get into the review and see what the brand and the watch is all about. We have a diameter of 38.6, closer to 37.5 without the bezel, lug to lug of 47.9, height of 12.5, and a lug width of 20 millimeters. Some other general specifications: we're going to have the SW200-1 movement beating way in here. No ghost date wheel or anything like that, so nice, just one position, which is the time setting. We have 200 meters of stated water resistance with a screw down crown. The watch also has a double dome sapphire crystal with an AR coating on it. They don't state whether it's under AR or over AR or both, so take that for what you will. We have a 60-click bi-directional bezel, and they also use C3 Super Luminova for everything that glows, which is all this kind of yellow tinted lume, the edge of the seconds hand, and the bezel insert here. And last but not least, this watch retails for $775 direct from Halios. So looking at the dial here, we have, I guess, a layout that's almost deceivingly simple. We have square markers for everything that's not the 3, 6, 9, and 12, and then for the 3, 6, 9, and 12, we have these more elongated rectangles. Something you don't notice about the markers on first glance is that after looking at every one individually, you see there is a facet on the edge of each one towards the face, facing the inner portion of the dial, and it slopes down slightly. It's not the biggest downturn or anything, but it does help catch the light, play with the kind of just light around it a little bit more than had it been just a completely flat, non-faceted marker. Looking at the dial, you can see they kept it very clean and very balanced in the text. You just have Halios and then their logo, kind of stylized 20 Atmos logo to kind of balance out there, and the model name of Fairwind. You also have automatic at the very bottom, and of course the printed second track along the outside, or the printed minutes track, however you'd like to say it. I do like how they put the seconds track on the very edge and use this kind of domed crystal, because it does give it an effect where at certain angles it disappears. It looks almost like it's not there, but then it also is exaggerated at other angles, making it look more elongated. So it's a pretty cool effect. Looking at the hands themselves, there's classic kind of baton style hands. They are polished on the outsides, brushed on the insides, Luminova filled in everywhere else. And then we have this nice kind of pseudo sector feel with a kind of circular recessed portion along the middle here. And that is the dial. It's very simply done. It has this beautiful gray tone to it, more of a dark gunmetal-ish gray, and it's nice. The thing I always have a kind of issue with personally is the use of C3 Super Luminova. It has this very green-leaning lume signature, and you can see it even when it's not loomed up. I think it distracts away from the watch. It adds green where you don't necessarily need it. I think they did play along those tones more because they actually made the very tip of this kind of arrowhead in a green color. So it does fit along with this kind of tone of the dial, but even then, I think it would look cleaner with an all white BGW9 layout. Zooming in close here, you can see the actual dial has this kind of subtle texture to it, almost like a black eggshell texture. Again, you can see up close the little facets that I was talking about earlier that kind of point towards the central hand stack. Really nicely done there. And a very, very defined brushing along the middle portion of the seconds hand, the middle portion of the, well, all the hands technically. And it is done very nicely. I think it's a little bit more aggressively grained than most brushing that I'm used to, but it doesn't look cheap by any means, and it looks almost like a stylized brushing. And I would have almost preferred if they used that a little bit more on the dial. Looking at the text, you can see it's very cleanly done. I don't think it's the most kind of bulbous application ever done. They could have made it probably rise off the dial a little bit more, but that's a very minor detail. The kind of recessed track along the middle portion here looks very nice, very cleanly done. The kind of base elements, the dial, the text, all that is done very nicely on the dial, but there are some kind of imperfections with the metal applications. There is a little bit of roughness on the hour hand here. The minute hand actually looks pretty fine. Even the edges look pretty good, but there is some dirtiness along some of the general hour markers. The 12 looks fairly fine, but if you move down here to the 8 o'clock, you can see there is some dirtiness along that hour marker there. Not unexpected for the sub-grand price point. Honestly, it looks a lot better than other watches I have looked at, so really no complaints. The lume signature itself is filled in really nicely, really finely compacted, so overall really well executed. So moving on to the case and bracelet of this watch, and I think this is where Halios did an amazing job. The case itself is mainly brushed. We have a vertical brushing here along the lug tops, which leads nicely into the vertical brushing of the bracelet itself. We have this nice kind of chamfer along the very edge of the lug that kind of is very thin towards the middle and then expands towards the edges and wraps around the lug, which is really nice. I haven't really seen that used a lot. A fairly deceivingly thin mid case with a really big amount of curve down to the lugs there and fairly long lugs just in proportion to how the case shape was built. It does slope down slightly here to meet the case back, and it makes the actual mid case look thinner than it is, which is a really nice touch. Nice Halios signed crown there. Very simple brushed bezel and a circular graining with the alternating dots and numerals. And again, you do have that 60 click. It is a very defined and purposeful click through. It isn't the most, I guess, pleasurable sound. It isn't the most high quality action, but it is nice overall. It lines up nicely and not many complaints there. One look kind of like down the barrel shot, and you can see how nicely sculpted the case is, kind of thickest towards the bezel, slightly going down in millimeters again by about half a millimeter on each side towards the thickest part of the case, and then again just gently sloping down towards where it eventually meets the case back. So it gives it a really soft feel to the side of the case. It's not going to dig into the wrist in any way. The ends of the lugs are a little bit more angular, but at least those are curved down nicely so that they'll sit really comfortably on the wrist. As you can see, very, very plain case back with just some general information on there. And then moving on to this really well constructed bracelet. It uses this kind of really blocky H-link style. It has that classic angular look to it, and it plays with the light really nicely. Pretty dramatic taper from 20 all the way down to 16. And this is pretty much what the kind of Laurier bracelet should be. It doesn't taper dramatically in the first 3 links. It has this nice gradual taper. It looks nice, it fits well, and it looks well proportioned on the wrist. One really nice touch about the bracelet is although it's mostly all brushed along the lug tops, we do have this polished chamfer along each of the lug sides that actually make it kind of slope down. So it gives a little bit not only light play to the actual bracelet, but just an extra finishing step that didn't need to be taken. So moving into the push button deployant clasp, we also have this little button here that acts as a little bit micro adjustment station, which is really, really nice to see on a sub $1,000 watch. It is a very nice action to it. You get a good about probably half a link of adjustment, maybe a full link. And it works really easily. You just push down and then push in or out, and it's really easy to even do on the wrist. So really nice application of the micro adjust there, and they didn't make the clasp overly thick even though it has that mechanism in there. Really nice to see female end link, so it can drape really nicely. This bracelet itself has a lot of articulation, so it's going to drape really nicely on the wrist. It has a kind of really silky, smooth feeling to it, and it's not too heavy by any means. So overall, well balanced and well constructed bracelet. My only criticism being it can't go too small. I believe on their website they state it can only go up to a 6.25 inch at the lowest. And although I can't take out any more links, I do have, enough room in the micro adjust area, but it does end up kind of not being well balanced enough to where I think I would like to have taken out a link on the kind of bottom side and put it into the top, because I don't like where the bracelet lays. So moving on to how the watch wears, earlier I was wearing my lovely Grand Seiko, the SBGJ 249. Beautiful, beautiful dial on this one. And here's how the Halios wears on my 6.5 inch wrist. And I think you can tell it wears amazingly. It has a really kind of nice lug to lug length. It isn't too long, but it isn't too short. It has a nice presence on it. Again, it turns down really nicely, so it has kind of a nice angular turn down to the wrist where it hugs it, but it just still looks nice and it has a kind of almost aggressive case shape. I think it just looks beautiful. Again, there's a lot of light play happening with this bracelet here, and it tapers nicely. It doesn't taper weirdly. It doesn't stick up weirdly at the ends here. It is just really well made, and the clasp, again, really easy to use, really easy to open and close on the wrist. A little bit harder to close than it is to open, but you can still get away with it. So I can get a perfect fit with my 6.5 inch wrist. I hope if you can go down to 6.25, you can still get your perfect fit. but this bracelet is slightly made for the bigger wristed. Looking at it from the side view there, again, it does conform really nicely. Any flexion, and it meets really just comfortably with the wrist. No harsh angles, no kind of jagged edges, and it's just a pleasure to wear. So here we have the watch on the suede straps that is included with the watch. And one thing I really like about the lugs is although there is a slight lug gap that's created, because they angle downward and the bezel is very slightly larger than the case, it does a good job of hiding the lug gap, and I think making it a lot more kind of clean than most lug gaps end up looking. Now, unfortunately, I would have to poke a hole in this strap to make it fit me, but it does look good. I think the gray tones, the gray on gray, looks really nice together. Again, overhead, you don't get too much of that lug gap showing out. So really comfortable strap, really nice addition, and not too shabby. For a little bit more of a sporty combo, we have this Barton Elite silicone strap. I think the green tones work really well with the green tones, not only in the second hand, but of the C3 Super Luminova. I really like the subtle texture that the kind of strap adds to the watch as a whole. I think it complements nicely, and I do wear it on this fairly often. And then here we have this vegetable tan leather from Barton Jack. I don't even know if they still make these, but cool combo with the watch, nice color. The brown tones work pretty well, I think. And there we have it, dresses the watch up a little bit. Again, not too much of the lug gap showing through. So yeah, putting it on the classic Archer silicone strap, I think you can see it doesn't pair perfectly because of the green leading tones of the Lume. And I think this also kind of brings out the fact that the 12 o'clock triangle doesn't match the Lume signature perfectly as well. So it is what it is. That's kind of the give and take you get when you use C3. And there we have it, super comfortable, plays really nicely with the gray tones and the gray bezel, and again, wears super comfortably on wrist. Looking at the Lume here, as you can see, it shines pretty brightly. I mean, brightly enough to where you can even read a little bit of the dial. It gives this nice kind of halo glow effect to the domed crystal too, which I think is a nice touch. Every element's loomed pretty nicely and all the tones match pretty well. I will say in person, the 12 o'clock marker is a little dimmer than the rest of it, but overall, a pretty good application. Relooming, comparing to the Timex, I think you can see the kind of color brightness of it is pretty similar. Of course, Timex has a little bit more surface area, but overall, Halios did a really good job on the Lume here. So pros and cons of this watch, I think one of the biggest pros is just gonna be the quality of kind of the construction of it. It is a really well-built watch down to the bracelet with that quick adjust mechanism, which I think is kind of unrivaled at the price point. It is really well built. The bracelet has a lot of articulation. It looks nice. It catches the light beautifully. It has a well-sculpted mid case. Everything is done to a very high standard overall, and I think that value for money, you're getting a lot of bang for your buck. Another big pro for me is going to be the actual fit of the watch itself. Again, the mid case is fairly thin and conforming, so it sits nicely on the wrist. The bracelet, you have that micro adjust system, so you can get basically the perfect fit alongside the very thin, small, and articulating, not lugs, but links. And I really like how it feels on wrist. Again, I just have a slight little issue with the fact that I wish the bracelet links had more removable. That way I can get it to fit slightly better for the clasp for me, or even if you have a smaller wrist, so you can actually get it to fit you because it only goes down to 6.25 inches. But that is a minor gripe. It does fit well overall, and it looks good on wrist. And my other big, and I guess my final pro for the watch, is going to be the fact that it's only $775 at retail. And even on the used market, I've only seen them going around about like the $800 mark anyway. And I think for that amount of money, you're getting one of the best watches you can ask for. It is well built. It has a beautifully constructed case, a beautifully constructed bracelet, a fairly kind of universal and kind of go anywhere, do anything design. There's not a lot to knock about the watch. It's well built, and I don't think it's outrageous what they're asking for it. If anything, they could probably ask a little bit more. Moving on to cons of the watch, and there really aren't many of them, but of course my biggest is going to be the fact that they use C3 Super Luminova. I think the green tones, it just introduces too much color to the watch. It makes it clash with certain straps. Sometimes the green can just be an eyesore, to me at least. If they would have just gone for a pure white BGW9 signature, even if maybe if it doesn't glow as good in the dark, I don't know if the reason people go with C3, but the BGW9 would have looked cleaner. It would have matched straps better. It would have given more contrast with the gray dial. So I really don't see any reason why they shouldn't or couldn't have gone for that, and I think it would have been a better product had they have. And my only other con with the watch is, as I kind of mentioned this briefly in the pro section, the bracelet doesn't go small enough. There aren't enough links in it. If you have a sub 6-inch wrist, if you have a sub 6.5-inch wrist, really, it's not going to fit you perfectly, or it's not going to fit you overly comfortably. It needs a little bit more removable links, especially even at my 6.5-inch wrist. I need to move links over to make the bracelet clasp fit right. So it is an amazingly constructed bracelet, but there is a slight room for improvement, especially in the length of it. So final thoughts for the watch, and again, this is my first time ever experiencing a Halios in person, and the brand does really live up to the hype. It is a really well constructed watch. It is great value for money. It is a really good design, and there's even aspects in this watch that aren't found in watches twice, maybe even 3 times the price. So it is awesome value here. Overall, I think this gray dial option is really, really versatile. You can wear it very easily dressed down or dressed up. The bezel does play a little bit less towards the dressy nature, but even then you can still get away with it. It is a good looking watch. It is a well constructed watch, and I think if you can get one either at retail or slightly above retail or used for a fairly good price, it's kind of a no-brainer. If you like the look of it and you can get over the C3, which I really can't, it's an amazing watch. And I don't think you'd be disappointed. If anything, it would probably supersede some of your expectations. So if you get one, let me know what you think. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in another one.